I remember one time having a dry heaving spell, and I looked in the mirror at my bathroom, and I was getting ready for work, and I was like, "How did you get here? Like, you, Miss I take care of everybody, I fix everything, you designated driver, like, how did I end up here? What is this monster I'm looking at?" And then truly that out of control feeling of not knowing how to stop. And I was so against going to rehab because I'm like, well, the world can't spin if I'm not, making sure that lunches are made and, that at my job, I'm going to lose my job over this. And, they're like, well, my husband and sister-in-law and brother-in-law were like, well, you're not going to be allowed to see it if you keep going at this direction.
And we are here with my friend Tanya. Thank you for doing this.
No, thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate you asking me.
I'm really excited to have you. You have an incredible story. We were just chit-chatting for a minute before I hit record, like you do. And you got sober in 2016.
April, so 4/8/16, which I thought was a good number because it was one I could
Oh,
remember. I have the same I have one other friend who is also the same birthday, but she has more time. So,
oh, okay. That is a good one.
yeah, because it's 4 and then 8 and then 16, so I'm all divisible by 4.
You want to know something that you're going to be the first person I've told this to? So my sobriety birthday is May 22nd, but if we're being 100% honest, it should be the 23rd. I realized it like a couple years in because the 22nd, I'm pretty sure was the last time I drank, not the day I got sober. I think. I do remember looking back at the calendar and being like, "No, that was the night that I, like, got drunk." But anyway, I was always like, "Should I change it?" And then I was like, "At this point, who ca it's a day."
No, it's a day, and even though we all know how much a day counts and,
But
but
22nd has a ring to it to me.
yeah,
It's like 2-2.
yeah.
I've always remembered it, so I'm like, I don't." I mean, if I lost my sobriety and was starting over, I wouldn't be like, "Well, I'm just gonna call it May 22nd."
Right.
Not crazy.
Not crazy.
Anyway, tell me your story. Go all the way back.
Okay, so this is I don't think I've told the story in this entirety, but it'll make sense as we get to further along. But, my sister and I were raised by an incredible mother. Um, my dad was around when I was born, left when I was 18 months old, came back when I was 7, left again for good at 9. And so I was watching this stay-at-home mom all of a sudden have to become breadwinner mom, everything to us, mom, dad, and she started to work at a bank because that's what she did beforehand, and she was making $750 a month, trying to raise 2 kids in, a pretty posh area of Orange County. So, yes, I'm from behind the orange curtain. Um, have left and have stayed firmly in Los Angeles ever since. Um, but, I have this empathy nerve that just, was very active. And so I would remember sitting with my mom at the table at 9 years old, doing on the 15th and the 31st or the 30th, doing bills and having her cry because we weren't gonna be able to, you know, make it that month, and her mom and dad, my grandparents, would have to help out. But I don't want it to sound all doom and gloom because I mean, yes, I feel my childhood was taken away, and what started, a lifelong pathway for me was that of Tanya will fix this. Tanya will take care of this. Tanya is going to be designated driver. If you have a problem with anything, you go to Tanya. and I lived in that world, through my starter marriage, and, that came a little later, and then went through divorce, and all through this time, I'm not a drinker, and, I don't have the story where I started drinking at 13. I would drink, but I would, leave wine in my glass, and I didn't like beer, it was gross, so college drinking was gross to me, and I tried really hard in college because I had to be, like, the best, and I had to, just succeed at everything I did. I got a full-time job before I even graduated, UCLA because I was worried I wouldn't get a job. So I was working a full-time job and getting my last year's degree. So there wasn't time to party, and I, didn't go through the normal dorm situation where you go and live in a dorm. Um, and I always was very fearful of being out of control. Like, the thought of and I had a horrible fear of throwing up. My I Part of my caretaking situation was that, my sister was bulimic, and we were roommates in college because we were still, with 2 other girls, and, I my mom asked me because she was so worried because Karen Carpenter had just died of bulimia that somehow I had to keep my sister from dying, and so, but I had to keep it a secret to everybody else, and so I had this weird relationship with, like, throwing up, I had this weird relationship with being out of control, and to me, alcohol and drugs, all that did was put me in a place of being out of control and sick. And so, I think fear, for the most part, really kept me out of any kind of trouble with alcohol or drugs at an early age. And as I got older and I was in my career, I would travel and it was very glamorous and I was traveling the world and, I learned to drink when I was living in Paris and I was living in Brussels and, I was like, so it was a glamorous kind of learning to drink. But I think I got tipsy, but again, it was never to that point of feeling like I needed to, throw up or that I didn't have my mind about me. Um and so, really, I didn't start my drinking career, until I was 36, and I had just married my husband, the real one, not the starter one, and, he he's also in a program, same program as I am. He's 30 days behind me, and I'll tell you why. But we would open he later on has told me that he had a problem with alcohol, but he thought it had gotten better, and, especially because he was living up in Oregon by himself and just really lonely, and then he moved back home here to, the Orange County area, and so he had kinda cut back on his drinking, but when we got together, we loved to cook and we loved to entertain, and so we'd open a bottle of wine with dinner and, and that once that was done, we opened a second bottle of wine, and so it just became, like, this life I'd never had before of new love, responsible man, drinking fine wines, cooking together, and I didn't think it was odd that we were drinking every night because in Europe, you do open a bottle of wine when you are eating dinner, but I didn't realize that that little monster of alcoholism was, like, working in the back of my brain going, "You're not sick, and this tipsiness feels kinda good, and you're so much more effervescent and bubbly and having" I was an all unicorn, love, and rainbows kind of drunk until I wasn't. But,
Was it in your family? I mean, is there any
there is, but
genetic component?
there is a genetic component with my
Okay.
dad's side of the family, but because he left when I was 9, and he's briefly in my life, and that has to do with an amends process that I made, and, um,
Because I
so
can
that
relate to that because my mother and stepfather did not have any kind of issue with drinking. But my biological father was he was addicted to pills like his
yeah,
whole life. But it was a thing where I would be like, well, it's not in my family, but it's like, well, it is. There's
and I didn't
definitely addiction
even
in my family. It's my father.
Yeah, it took me so long to realize that because it wasn't my mom, and, because I lived with her and I saw how she raised and, alcohol was just for fun parties and I never saw her drunk,
Same.
and, um, but my dad, I remember when we had to go for visits, and, I'll just say that he wasn't always appropriate with my sister and I, more with my sister than with me, but it was uncomfortable, and even though I love his wife at the time, and, I remember her saying, "Bill, you're driving, you're swerving, you're not hitting the roads," and that was, like, my first kind of inclination, and I also thought it was really weird that no I mean, I remember being in St. Louis and going for a visit, and I guess you could go into bars at 18, but you couldn't drink, I think, something along those lines, I don't remember, but I was 17, and so they just stopped in the middle of the day and went in because it was time for margaritas, and so I had to sit outside of this restaurant and just sit there while my sister felt bad, she'd, like, come in and go out and go, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Lori, just go in and, like, be with them, it's fine, not a big deal." But so those are the revelations that I had of memories that, because I wasn't around what I thought alcoholism was. In fact, I didn't even know I was an alcoholic. I just thought I was going through perimenopause, so because it couldn't have been my drinking. And so, fast forward well, this is an integral part of the story. So my husband and I tried to have a child and I wasn't able to. Ended up having kind of like a hysterectomy, but something different, but it wouldn't allow me to have children. And it was all around the same time that my sister, a little bit beforehand, had adopted her first daughter through the LA foster care system and, through an agency. And, oh, she was just the love of our life, and it was great to be an aunt. And, both she and my husband came within 7 days of each other, so of meeting them. And so it was just a really beautiful time of my life. And then she went and adopted another little one a few years later, who's also precious. And at the same time, my mom was given early retirement. She was still living in Orange County in the house we grew up in. And she decided that, well, for reasons that she had to go through a surgery and she was not well. And so she lived with my sister for a while and then she lived with me for a while. And while we sold her house and got it ready so she could buy something up near us because we weren't moving back. And so she um spent a solid year, this first solid year of my youngest niece's life holding her. And we used to call her Buddha baby because she was just the most peaceful little baby you'd ever imagine. And my mom at that moment decided that her calling in life was to give respite to foster babies and not to adopt them but to make the reunification process easier. And although I think she would have adopted had she been given the chance, but, you know, so
So what
anyway,
what year are we at now?
so this is 2000 and 2000 and well, right now where I'm getting to is 2009,
Okay.
2010 about.
Okay. So we're a ways away from you getting sober still.
But this is where the drinking starts.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah. Yeah, I was just trying to place it in my mind. Yeah.
yeah.
This is where I stopped drinking and this is where you ramp up.
I had 10 solid years, man. Made valedictorian of drinking in 10 years. Um, I so mm, I was on a business trip and my sister, emailed me a picture and because I always said I wanted a little boy with big brown eyes, and that's why I said, "Oh, I want one kid, and I want it to be a boy, and I want it to look like my husband." And, and so I used to even carry baby pictures of him when we were trying to get pregnant. And so we were in Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur, and I get an email from my sister with a picture attached, and she said, "I just met your son." And, and my sister is very into supernatural and a bunch of different things where I tend to be the more, non-hippy dippy person, although I've become hippy dippy. So, being in a certain program allows you to explore that side of yourself. Um, and my husband and I just laughed. We're like, cute kid, but whatever, right? And so we come home and my mom shows up with this precious little boy. He was 9 months old. And, you know, I can't explain it, but there was just something in me with it. That's my son. That is my son. Lori was right. Like that is. And so I turned to my husband, who's very practical, and I said, "So, he looks like he's available for adoption. Would you ever consider it?" And he goes, I think I would. And so like the next day, that's all I needed. The next day I was like on the phone with DCFS. I was getting us, certified and trained because I just fell in love with this child. And so while we were going through our training, my mom was fostering my son, and we would go over every week and take care of him and give him baths and feed him and all that sort of stuff. But I believe that this is when my drinking went from maybe a heavy social drinker to medicinally drinking to forget or to get rid of nerves or to get rid of fear. Because when he was transitioned into our home, it wasn't an easy adoption, and I won't go into any of the details of it, but it was not an easy adoption. But then, but for 2 years while he was living with us, I had to say goodnight to him every night as if it would be the last night I'd ever see him. And all the while, I'm falling more and more in love with him. And so after he would go to bed, Brad and I didn't just stop drinking at dinner. We would continue on watching TV, and then I would go to sleep. And, fortunately, I don't think he saw the worst of me. He saw me not being present in the mornings. I'd be there, but maybe hungover and not feeling great. Well, the whole concept of being afraid of throwing up and feeling dizzy and outside of myself, I got over because, again, I was having dry heaves and I was like, how can you become an alcoholic on wine? Sauvignon Blanc at that, like I just it didn't make any sense to me. And it's funny because when I went to my first AA meeting, first meeting that I went to for program, I was like, they were talking about, what their drink of choice was. And I was expecting to hear like vodka and tequila. And they were like, oh, rosé, or oh, it was a cab sab. And I was just like, oh my gosh, you really can become an alcoholic on
White
wine.
wine, white wine, wino
Right.
right
Right.
here. It's the only
That's
thing that we still to this day, 17 years later, I can't have in the house.
I can't have it in the house either, and it's hard because there's certain parts of the world I travel in, because there's only a certain kind of white wine I would drink, and from that part of the world, it's like I can't even smell it. I'm like a vampire. It's like all of a sudden I'm like, someone's having, a Sauvignon Blanc around me,
Yes.
it's like, "Go to Chardonnay, go to Chardonnay." You know?
Yes.
So, um, but yeah, so fast forward to the part
So you were
where
having anxiety, you were having fear and
massive
anxiety
anxiety.
around do you think you were also having I'm getting this from the fact that you're a perfectionist. I'm feeling like this was a brand new challenge with a lot of components that seemed out of your control. And I mean, I think that's a big reason people like us drink.
Yeah. And I should add on top of that, that right at the time that he was transitioning into my house, my mom and my sister and my 2 nieces, which really consisted of my family, um, picked up and moved to China, to
Oh.
Beijing. And so my entire support system left. And my mom, which for reasons I won't go into, was angry with me, and because my son had another sibling come along, and she wanted me to pick up that sibling, and I said I could only handle the one, and, and because he was delayed in a lot of areas, and I had to really be present, and, um,
Oh, and your mom got
so
upset?
so she got really upset, and that's why in part, she moved there because she was mad at me, for not adopting and I didn't have the choice because, her grandparents wanted to adopt her, and so and I made a decision very early on once I learned that we were able to keep our son, that if the maternal biological grandparents who were adopting, his sister, if they wanted to still be a part of his life, because I thought it would be important later on that my son knows his biological family as long as everybody was safe because his biological mother had shown some signs during our adoption process that she was maybe not very stable. She wasn't a, an alcoholic or drug user. She just, I think, had a mental health issue, and um but she was writing things in newspapers about us, and it was, we were being stalked a little bit.
And was this
Uh,
part of the reason why you were worried that you wouldn't be able to get your kid permanently?
yeah,
Okay.
because the stories were making it out to sound like we were buying him, and it was like because the grandparents weren't able to at the time adopt him, and for reasons that made perfect sense. They've since have 2 of the 5, adopted 2 of the 5, and all 5 kids are very well connected because I do believe I had something to do with that, of making sure that when the new adoptee parents came on, I'm like, "They're safe, they're good people." So what was supposed to be a 2-year stay in China became like almost a 7-year stay in China, and, whenever they would come home to visit, my mom and sister only had each other during that time, and they were just, like, at each other's throats, and so they'd come home, and Brad
I
would
thought that was
literally.
gonna go a different way. Like,
Yeah,
I thought, oh, in a thing that I sort of relate to, I thought you were gonna say that they became like besties and
they
you felt that
did,
on the
codependent
outside.
besties.
Okay.
So, but not having anybody else to speak to, they each, one didn't like the way they were raising the kids, and then she didn't like they just spent too much time together.
Right.
And so they'd come for visits, and both of them would throw up on me. They were just like, and mom did this, and then and your sister would do this. And it was just like, and Brad would, like, my husband would make a beeline to the garage where he kept we had a freezer out there, and he'd have vodka, and he would just drink it straight from the bottle. He was just like, "I can't deal with your family being here," because they just were like chaos, and but I desperately missed them, and I loved them, and then fortunately, my mom would stay on for a little bit longer and stay in, like, an Airbnb, and she got to spend some really quality time with my son, and that was really important to her. And so, I remember one night, this was about she was going back to China. Everybody in my family was traveling overseas, so I was alone with my son, and, and she just went off on me, and she was like, "You're no better than a drunk in the street. You are gonna lose your job. You're gonna lose your husband. You're gonna lose your child. You're gonna lose everything." And I'm just like, "Mom, I just got a raise. I'm doing really well." Like, you know, my son is a very well adapted child, and I just couldn't believe that but my mom didn't have that filter because she was so scared for me. And then she's like, "Okay, I'm getting on a plane," and leaves, and like left me and I just went downhill. So it took me 4 months to end up in rehab after that call. And
Wow, so it kinda worked though.
it it worked because I was devastated, that that's how she saw me and didn't see, and because I was the fixer, and that all that I had done for her and all that I'd done for my sister, and I'm going, "You guys left me to be a parent by myself where you said you were supposed to be there," and I had this kept my job the whole time, and and so
So when she said that to you, did I mean, I understand what you just said. I hear you. But also did it hit something in your core? Did you go, "Oh, I do drink too much," or were you like, "That's crazy. I don't drink that much."
I had already believed that. And I
Okay.
had already believed that I had a problem, and, after that visit, my husband, put me in a detox for 3 days at a hospital, and I was just furious. I did it for him, not for me, And I'm like, "You drink too. Why are you in the bed next to me?" You know what I mean? It's like, "Why
Yeah.
do I have to be here?" You know?
Yeah, mister, you're in the garage drinking vodka straight from the bottle.
Right? Why am I the one that's getting picked on? And, and because I I after that, it was so funny because the people from my rehab were associated with the hospital, and they came and they're like, "Okay, so we're gonna put you in, you either have 30-day inpatient, you can do a 6-week IOP outpatient, you can," and I'm just like, "No, no, 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 I've got an around the world trip that I have to do, and we're going to Hungary for to celebrate, my father-in-law's birthday. I'll go to some meetings, and I'll just do it that way," you know? And I went to a meeting on Thursday at 12:30, and this beautiful woman came up to me and did what our program says to do, which is reach out to the newcomer, and I was like deer in the headlights, newcomer. And, took her name, took my name, and she's like, "We need to talk about whether you're ready to stop drinking or not," because I wasn't sure whether I was ready to stop drinking or not. And then, um we got back from that around the world trip, and I just stopped eating and just drank. And I stopped going to work, and it went really, like I said, it went really fast. And it was like I wanted to die. I had this beautiful son, beautiful life, beautiful career, and I wanted to die. And I thought that I was no longer useful to anybody on the planet. And when I tell you what happened in part two of my story, it's what's kept me sober, was those feelings, and to never go back to those feelings of, like, things can get really bad, and you cannot wanna be here necessarily, but be present, but be alive, and I didn't want to, and I never had been someone who would have ever considered it. I didn't wanna do it, and being in the rooms you hear about often, it's like, I didn't wanna be here anymore. But I was too afraid to die, so I was killing myself with alcohol or whatever their drug of choice was.
It's
So
interesting
I agreed
too
to
that
go.
when you sometimes when you quit or when you make an attempt to quit, it's worse. Like I mean, I had this problem in a different program many years ago, the food program. Uh with I was bulimic, like your sister. And I remember when I tried to get abstinent from that, when I started doing it again, it was like 20 times worse. It was just so
Mhm.
bad until I was able to stop by kind of some miracle, but actually with a program. I went to a program for that. But yeah, it was just so interesting that like you recognize that you have a problem and then it gets worse, not better.
Yeah,
I
well,
think
I
that's an
think
important thing for people to know that sometimes
yeah,
once you name it, you claim it, and then
yeah.
it's like you're like, "Well, fuck it. I might as well just like this is what I wanna do." And then why? I wonder why that is. I need a
I don't
therapist to
know
tell us.
because I remember one time having a dry heaving spell, and I looked in the mirror at my bathroom, and I was getting ready for work, and I was like, "How did you get here? Like, you missed, I take care of everybody, I fix everything, you designated driver, like, how did I end up here? Like, what is this monster I'm looking at?" And then truly that out of control feeling of not knowing how to stop. And I was so against going to rehab because I'm like, "Well, the world can't spin if I'm not, making sure that lunches are made and, that at my job, I'm gonna lose my job over this." And, they're like, "Well," my husband and sister-in-law and brother-in-law were like, "Well, you're not gonna be allowed to see it if you keep going at this direction." So, I think I absolutely loved my rehab. Like,
Oh,
I
so
came
you
home,
went.
I
Okay.
went,
Good one?
and
Did you go to a good one?
it was fantastic, not one of the good ones. I said I wanted to go and ride horses and do yoga, and my husband's like, "We're not paying $50,000 for you to go do horses and yoga."
Why?
I'm like, so I went to one where I slept in a single bed, and I always tell people that, like, my rehab was like college because of all the essays and things we had to write, did a lot of writing, um, camp because we were all in, like, you know, one big cabin together, if you will,
Mhm.
and then jail. because they would come and, like, flash your light on your bed, like, every 15 minutes, and, every now and again, they would just throw everything out of your bag to see if you had anything, and I was like, "Wow, like, how dare you? I'm here to get sober," like,
Right, right.
and I always say I was, like, the stupidest drunk on the planet because I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know about programs, and I didn't know like, I remember sitting there in rehab on my first day and seeing 12 steps on the wall. And I was done with them by the time, a solid hour had passed. I'm like, "Oh, okay, check, check." And I'm like, "Oh, there's some activity with that one." And then when I found out, like, how long it really takes to do it, I was like, "Wow." I was very much misled.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I came out of rehab, and that was the last day my husband stopped drinking, and so we've both now been sober 10 years, and, so very grateful for that. That's why I said he was 30 days behind me because he got his drink on while I was in rehab, so good for him.
Right.
Um, it
So
was
why did I know this is your story, not his, but what was he quitting in solidarity, or did he have some time to think and see his drinking without you without being able to compare himself to you, and like what was his deal?
his deal was I was the one with the problem, right? Like,
Right.
he had been a drinker for so long, like, he knew what his limit was, and I just, went from unicorns and rainbows to crying all the time, and so, he, in support of me, would go to the CODA meetings or the, other program meetings to, how to help relate to your drunk person or your
Right,
drugged out
right.
person. And then he sat there one day, I think it was the 3rd day he went to a meeting and he's like, "I think I need to be on that side of the wall." So he
Very
realized
common.
early on through me and through osmosis that he could really benefit from the program because I just sucked it in and just loved it. And again, whether it's my need to succeed or whatever, but whatever I was hearing was making a lot of sense to me. And I've never cried so much in my life. In fact, my husband got a t-shirt for me that said, if you're not trying if you're not crying." And I was like, "I am not wearing this, dude. It's not because I want to cry." You know, like he's like, "What? All your counselors think it's great." I'm like, "Yay for them." I'm like, I'm kind of, working through this quietly kind of thing. Um, and then, came out of rehab and I was done. And while I was in rehab, because they really want you to get a sponsor and get that person to help you. And I remember meeting this woman at that, 2 months previously, asked my husband to go find the phone number where I wrote it down and called her from a payphone, and just said, "Would you be my sponsor?" And she said, "Well, let's wait until you've got 2 more weeks. Let's wait until you get out, but yeah, I'll be your temporary sponsor," and I'm happy to say she is still my sponsor,
Oh,
and
that's so nice.
yeah, she's been wonderful and has been a big part of my recovery, a huge part.
So you
So,
come out and you're on a pink cloud, as they
pink
call
cloud,
it. You're like, "This is great. This is fantastic." How are things like at home? Your husband's just quit drinking.
things were not great between us, but we were committed to raising our son, and I asked my son if he remembers me ever. Because he was pretty young when I went into rehab, and then I said, "Do you have any memories of mom not being there for you or doing strange things or whatever?" And he goes, "No." And I'm grateful for that, because um, that would be a trust I wouldn't want to break. Because especially with kids who are adopted, you really need to let them know that they're safe and secure and loved and not going anywhere, um, so we'll get to it. Do we have
Yeah,
time for
but
me to get to my
well, is there anything more to this part? Like, so you and your husband, you weren't
there's one more
working.
thing.
Yeah.
I went through the amends process when I was doing my 9 steps, and I made an amends to, my mom, and she's out of all the people I gave my amends to, she's the one who didn't want it, didn't like it, and was mad at me about it because I had talked to my dad, um, through my self-exploration process, and I felt that it was a resentment that I needed to let go of. And it just happened to be that it was his 75th birthday, and his wife reached out to me, the one that I liked, and would say, "Would you just send him a card or an email?" And that started us communicating again. And my mom was furious because she had tons of resentments against him. And I could never get her to understand that it was because of my needing to stay sober. I can't hold on to resentments. I need them to not weigh me down. And she just couldn't get past her thing. But at least I know I did it. And that I'll come back to why that was important. So, back at work, and when I came out of rehab, one thing I said is I want to just be consistent. I want to show up. I don't want to be sick on Mondays. I want to, you know, be there when people call my phone or send me an email, want to reply back. I felt I had lost people's trust. Even though I showed up every day, I think they could tell something was wrong. Um, and so I was building myself back, and I'm so grateful because the God that I believe in, I believe had a plan for me, and it was I needed a full year of sobriety under my belt and having finished the steps before my mom and sister moved back home. And, because that was a whole new set of things, and because they were such big triggers for me and my husband, like, I needed to have my tool bag available. And I'm grateful that I had that time with her, and, she I had packed up her condominium and put things in storage for her, and so as she was unpacking her condominium, she's like, "Tanya, you did so much for me while we were in China." Like, her pipes blew twice, and I had to take care of it. We had a renter in there, and I was taking care of it, and, so in a way, I think she was trying to make an amends to me, but, it wasn't she's not really knowing. She was very proud of me, and I took her to an open meeting one time, and she just thought it was the greatest fun, and not being a drinker, but she just loved how we all held hands and prayed, and she's like she loved it, she loved the stories. And then she said at the dinner table, she goes, "Well," and I was so excited because somebody had asked me to be a sponsor for them, and I shared it at dinner, and she's like, "Oh, look at you going ahead and being the best at this." And I'm like, "Yeah, mom, because, when I was 9 years old, I said, I wanna knock, alcoholism and recovery. I wanna be the best at it." And then I'm like,
Oh,
"Nailed it." Like, I'm like, "Nobody grows up wanting to be good at this, and you should be happy because you thought I was gonna be dead on the side of the road."
right, right, right.
So then, life was really good. I had my family home, my nieces were back, my son was thrilled to have his cousins home,
And things are
and
getting better with your husband?
getting better, getting better. They're still getting better.
Okay.
So, people change when they go through recovery.
I think that's a
And
really important part of the story, though. I mean,
it's a big
it was a
important.
big adjustment for both of you being sober?
It was because I found out that his personality is not as jovial as it was and not as playful,
Mhm.
whereas I came into it as me, so, I like he saw what a sober me was, where I only saw kind of a lubricated him, and he's just gone even more into his shell, and he's, very quiet. And I as I tell this next part of the story, why I say it's still recovering was that, I needed a lot of support and a certain kind of support, and it didn't always show up the way I needed it, nor did I know how to ask for it. So, cut to the sad part of my story.
Okay,
Um
well, let's end this part then right here.
okay.
Please come back tomorrow, or if you're listening to this later, go listen to part 2. Um, you're a very strong person, and you have a really compelling, um, kind of inspirational story. So we'll get to that in part 2. Thank you, everybody. Please go like and subscribe, and what you can watch this on YouTube if you want to see what we look, facial expressions and whatnot. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Feeling like life is good, life is good, yeah. Life is good, life